It is the game, and it's the week of the game, regardless of the records, regardless of what the expected outcome is. It's special to millions across the country, and especially in the states of Ohio and Michigan, of course. We got Isaiah Hole on the line from Wolverines Wire. It's been a while, Isaiah. It's good to see you. Appreciate you and you stopping by to break things down for us.
Absolutely. This is the first time I've actually had you, and I call it my new space, but I've had it for a year and a half. Thank the Lord for blessing me with a house. But it's
Absolutely.
been because of that, it required extra time to just kind of get set up, and I couldn't miss this week, right? I was going to make this week happen one way or the other.
Appreciate you doing that. So let me ask you, let's get a little into your story as a Michigan fan. What is the first game that you remember between these two?
It's the vaguest possible memory of Desmond Howard striking the pose.
Okay.
It's that I remember sitting in my grandma's room. I lived with my grandparents at that time, I believe, or I just moved into, we just maybe moved into our new house. It was something like that. And I just remember seeing Desmond Howard strike the pose, and I was young enough to think like Desmond Howard always strikes the pose, right? That's just what he does. Cause I was like, 9, or I guess I would have been 10 years old at that time. And, you don't necessarily have a good handle on, what reality is. And I just remember like going around the house, striking the pose after that. Beyond that, honestly, like I don't think I really remember like I have a good handle on any Ohio State games, Michigan Ohio State games until I was in college. And even though I know I watched like 2000, I don't know that I think I watched 2003, 2004. I remember 2005 a little bit better. That was a game where it felt like Michigan was in control, and then almost like Lloyd Carr did the same thing with Ohio State that he did Texas. It was like, all right, let's go, like just pack up, because it was, Ohio State drives down the field. And same thing Texas did in the Rose Bowl the year before or earlier in the year. And, Troy Smith obviously takes home that win for the Buckeyes. 2006 is the one where I first remember it kind of vividly, having a party at my house off campus and all of that. But it's certainly it's been a journey watching these two teams, and I'm more accustomed to seeing Michigan lose in my adult life, because even though I'd check on the scores and everything, and when I was in high school, to me growing up, because I was more accustomed to Michigan beating Ohio State more often than not, and I wasn't like a huge college football fan, and I lived in the state of Michigan as I currently do, I thought of Michigan State as being the bigger rival. So I didn't pay as much attention, and it was only when I got really into football in my early 20s, college football, I was already into pro football. That was when I kind of all of a sudden like, oh, I didn't know anything about this. And I didn't understand that like Ohio State was the main rival. And that's when I kind of got attuned to the lore. And that's what really ultimately pulled me out of the pro football fandom and into college football fandom.
So, Isaiah, since you interact with Michigan fans every day, I'm not talking about this specific game this week, because obviously it means so much more to Ohio State, and Michigan's looking to the future. Michigan fans are looking to the future, and we'll get to that in just a second. Do you think overall Michigan fans, even into the administration, the athletic department, everybody connected to the university, cares about this game as much as Ohio State as the counterpart?
I think to some degree they do, but at the same time, like, it's, I remember talking to some mutual friends of ours, and, they were kind of the idea of like, hey, this can be, if Ohio State is going to win a game in the rivalry, it might as well be this one, right? Michigan's down. There's no reason for you to hold on to this, let regroup the team and get back to a better place, and let the baby have its bottle essentially, and we'll get them next year. But then there's others, and I tend to be more, even though I'm not really like an actual fan or whatever, I'm a little bit in this game, just more so because I get so much hate from so many Ohio State fans. So it becomes personal. But I'm a little bit more like, if I'm Michigan, take no quarter, right? Like, don't give them the out just because, you are not that good this year, and because this is their dream team. Go back to those 1990s games where it was mediocre Michigan going into the shoe and somehow stealing one from John Cooper, right? So like, I think there's a little bit of a mix of those types of thoughts between Michigan fans, and certainly within the halls of Schembechler Hall, they want to win. But I think that no one's ever going to say this, but obviously they know that, what they've been versus what Ohio State is right now. It's not quite the same, but I think that they feel like maybe Michigan's starting to kind of understand what it's capable of. You finally saw the first complete game of the season the week before the game. You saw the offensive line playing as one. You saw smarter defensive and offensive play calling. So I think that they internally have this idea of like, this now's the time, right? If we're going to be able to do it, win a big game this year and really put a stamp on our season, understanding like we have these goals and beating Ohio State is one of those goals. Some of the goals, Big Ten championship, college football playoff, those are out the window, but we can certainly achieve one of our goals and send out our seniors having never lost to these guys. So I think that that's certainly the mentality within the building.
And I think that there's a viable path, and a lot of people don't agree with me, but I think between the running game, the magic of Donovan Edwards against Ohio State, he's basically built an entire career legacy just based on Ohio State games and postseason games overall, really. And then you go to, of course, the front four on defense in particular, and then shoot across the 50-yard line and bring on your All-American kicker to get at least some points on the board. That there are, not necessarily where Michigan has an advantage that's obvious anywhere, but if Ohio State's offensive line, which has adjusted well to injuries, doesn't, and Michigan takes advantage like Nebraska did several weeks ago, then this game can get mucked up and Michigan can go on 7-minute drives, possibly, with Khalil Mullings just being a battering ram, and really shorten this game and give them a shot.
Yeah, I think that that's certainly got to be the goal. I just talked about on my podcast, Lockdown Wolverines, that I think the Nebraska game's kind of the goal, get within that striking distance, or, obviously for Michigan, the game that they've played is kind of make it look like the Indiana game, but just don't let them get out to the hot start like Indiana did. There's certainly a path, like you said. I don't believe that that's necessarily a high percentage ability to win the game, but there's a path, and that path is part of it is starting fast. They didn't start fast in 2022, but they don't have an offense that's as capable as the 2022 offense was. So I think that it's going to be important. And you look at like Ohio State and the way that they've started a lot of these games, it feels like that they often, especially against relatively good competition, that they tend to stall out relatively early. And then they start get rolling late first quarter, throughout the second quarter, and then into the third. So if you're Michigan, you need to muck that up a little bit, because I think part of the reason why Michigan's found itself in trouble a lot of times this year is because a lot of these games, they've let the other team start fast. You've seen Washington start fast. You look at both Texas and Oregon, both of those teams started fast. And then Michigan started to get back into the swing of things a little bit later. And by that time, it was kind of like the damage was done. So you just got to be able to take advantage of what you've kind of seen from Ohio State and hope that they do start a little bit slow. And I think that when you look at some of the play calling that you saw from both Wink Martindale and Kirk Campbell, I think that this last game was finally the first time that you saw both of them call a complete game. And that's good news, because you've seen a lot of times where Michigan, like you said, where Michigan's going to really have to rely on that front four versus the Ohio State offensive line. You've often seen moments where Wink Martindale on a 3rd and long is doing some exotic pressure and has Mason Graham on the edge, and then they end up exploiting that one way or another, instead of just relying on the fact that, hey, you've got guys that can win that battle straight up one-on-one. You don't have to do all of this kind of obfuscation and things of that nature. So you finally saw him I think, be humbled, and there's a reason why they haven't allowed a touchdown in 6 quarters. I don't think it's a long enough timeline to sit there and say they've turned the page, right? Because it's kind of hard to go into the Ohio State game, suddenly being like, all right, well, they've had 6 really good quarters, now they're ready. But I think in a way they're as ready as they'll ever be. And I think offensively, if you're Michigan, you hope that it looks a lot like it tends to do in this game, where you've seen, Michigan offenses that were maybe not quite as offensively challenged, go in and being able to move the ball against Ohio State. And, even ones that were like good offenses, everyone was going into the 2019 game saying, all right, well, Michigan's not going to be able to pass the ball in this one. And Shea Patterson threw for over 300 yards against the #1 pass defense. 2022, Michigan's not going to be able to run the ball in this one. If they don't have Blake Corum, which, I mean, I even said this, if they don't have Blake Corum, they have no chance to win this game. Well, you mentioned Donovan Edwards, and they found a way to do it. Everyone said they also couldn't throw downfield, and J.J. McCarthy obviously had the big downfield pass to Cornelius Johnson. And just hearing some of the things that Kurt Campbell said on the Inside Michigan Football radio show, it's like, there's some things that they think that we can't do that we're going to be able to do. That's some confidence, I'll tell you that, but I'm curious to see what those things are. And if Michigan's offense has kind of found enough mojo to be able to keep Ohio State from just loading up the box and saying, we dare you to pass on us.
Ohio State, a big 3-touchdown favorite against Michigan. Of course, Fox has the game at noon Eastern time, and that is the largest point spread I've heard a few bandied about. One was 2008, that really bad Michigan team after Lloyd Carr left. Buckeyes won 42-7. Then, of course, the big upset in 1996 that you referenced in Columbus. Ohio State, a 17-point favorite, much in the same position they are right now, although a much different playoff setup, obviously. Isaiah Holes at Wolverines Wire. Please check him out and all the good work there. Please like the video here at the Voice of College Football and subscribe. All right, Isaiah, let's go big picture on this one. So I made the comment to somebody today. I said it's crazy that this, for any Ohio State or Michigan fan, this is like the week. This is the focus, but Michigan limps in at 6-5. And in past iterations of the landscape of college football, it would still be about the game. But there's all this NIL, transfer portal, recruiting emphasis on the future and stockpiling and the arms race. And so obviously the acquisition of Bryce Underwood is enormous. Beyond that, it doesn't seem to be like that's just a one-off. Like, this is the spearhead of something big at Michigan. Like, is this as revolutionary? I don't want to overstate it as much as it may appear to be.
That's the plan, at least. I mean, they obviously have to be able to deliver on that beyond Bryce Underwood. And I think that's certainly what they're going for. Talking to some people around the program, they understood before the season even started that they were falling behind in the just kind of college football arms race. They knew before the season started, like, this isn't going to be kind of like, we can hope, like, right, we've got the continuity and maybe the culture will carry us through. And, maybe some guys that aren't necessarily like these big time players, just by virtue of playing with and against some of these guys in practice, that they'll be able to do, kind of pick up the mantle and run with it. And then you get the rude awakening as the season starts. So there was a concerted effort behind the scenes to say, like, we need to get in the NIL space. And it wasn't for a lack of trying before that, right? I was at a donor meeting that had all the big names, some of the donors, Ward Manuel, some of those people before the national championship game, the day of the national championship game, and it was like, the message being like, do you like being here? Do you want to be here again? Is this fun? Did you like the Rose Bowl last week? Do you like beating Ohio State? Well, you give us money, because that's the only way we're going to be able to do it. So it wasn't for a lack of trying. But certainly, I think that there was a little bit of doubt that they needed, that from the people who would donate. Michigan having the largest alumni network in the world, I just don't think that they really thought that they had to really get involved in this, and that they could just kind of continue doing things. And I don't think it helped that Jim Harbaugh constantly said transformational, not transactional, because people absolutely adored that saying. They'll adore it when you can win a national championship. But from there, then that's when, the Ellisons get involved, thanks to Jolene Ellison. I don't know how to pronounce her name. And, when you get the wife of the second richest man in the world involved, then certainly then you've got a little bit of a, honeypot, I guess, to kind of work with. And you could see kind of the strategy in the immediate aftermath of Bryce Underwood's commitment. They issue a re-offer to Jakeem Stewart, the 5-star edge out of Baton Rouge, Edna Carr, who he's been looking at a couple different schools, in-state LSU, Ohio State, Oregon, USC. And suddenly, like, it's the way for Michigan to say, like, we really mean this. We're not kidding. They go and offer Isaiah Gibson, another defensive lineman out of Warner Robins, Georgia, who's committed to Georgia, right? Like, they're shooting arrows across bows here. And Ty Haywood is another one out of Ryan, Texas, who may or may not be visiting. Really no clarification on that, and certainly a strong position to flip the offensive tackle who's a 5-star. They're definitely getting into the game, and I've been told that there's going to be a lot more moves coming. There will be some surprises come signing day, is at least what they hope. When it comes to the transfer portal, they're going to be aggressive because they're aware of the shortcomings that this current roster has. And obviously, you don't want to just bring in Bryce Underwood and then just say, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but be like, all right, Bryce, look, you got Peyton O'Leary to throw to. Have fun, right? Like, no offense to Peyton O'Leary, but, that's not what other teams are bringing in. They're not developing a walk-on and having him start at wide receiver. They're tending to have, you look at like a DeCorian Moore over at Oregon, or, Jamie French and some of these higher end guys, right? You get the high end quarterback, a high end wide receiver to throw to. So I think that they're going to continue to try to surround Bryce with talent, right? And I think that that's part of the pitch. It isn't that, hey, we need you to singularly come in and save this thing. It's, we need to overhaul what we're doing. We would like you to be the centerpiece of it, but you're still just a part. And I think like that does overshadow things, because suddenly Michigan's playing in a similar space to what Ohio State has played in like the month of June, but they're doing it in November, right? So Michigan suddenly getting a taste of like what it feels to win the offseason before the offseason's even gotten here. So they're looking to the future and saying, like, I have good memories about the Rose Bowl. I'm going to have more good memories about the Rose Bowl. This season is the wash that it is, and I can't, we already can't wait to see what happens in bowl prep when Bryce Underwood's able to put the helmet on, and waiting to see what happens when you get down to fall camp and into the next year.
Disputed National Champions by yours truly. It's a historical reset of all the seasons during the 1990s, so 1990 through 99. Too much to explain here, but you might be, folks, particularly interested in 1997. But it's not just a history book. We take all the results of all those seasons and everything that happened and put them forward into the BCS era, the 14 playoff era, the 12 team, and the proposed 14 team playoff era. We got Isaiah Hole here from Wolverines Wire. One more thing here. Sherrone Moore. So there was a point during mid-season when things were at its worst, and he had obviously mishandled the quarterback situation to some degree, although there are some excuses in play that might be legitimate, that maybe they would think about parting ways, but they obviously haven't. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. It just doesn't seem as though with all this recruiting momentum that they're basically tying him to that and saying, hey, let's give it a shot with him on board, and who knows about changes to the staff. So how much has your confidence and trust in Sherrone Moore changed throughout this season in terms of him developing into a big-time college football coach?
I didn't really have any doubt with him to begin with. I don't think that a lot of people, a lot of fans, pundits understand just kind of the cupboard that was left bare by Jim Harbaugh. I certainly thought the season was going to go a lot better. I thought that the continuity was going to help, and I thought that they'd have a little bit better of a plan at the quarterback position and kind of run with it. But I think whether it was Orgy or Davis Warren, I think that you could have had it just basically established that a lot earlier and been more consistent with either of those guys in whatever direction you went with. But I think also they wanted Jack Tuttle to be the starter, and he just wasn't able to go at the beginning of the season. So, but you also just kind of look at, the talent that they didn't have, right? Like, I went in saying, like, what wide receivers are going to be able to do much of anything, right? They lost all of the production there, even though you have Colston Loveland. Like, you can't just rely solely on him. Running backs, I looked at Donovan Edwards, and, he's a good friend of mine, but I also, look at last season, and you sit there and say, is it really going to be a rebound enough where he suddenly is like Blake Corum was in his junior year? I was skeptical of that. And I felt a lot better about the defense, and that Wink Martindale was going to keep the continuity there, but some injuries pile up, as well as some hubris from the coaching standpoint. And it makes sense that things wouldn't go quite so perfectly there. So I just look at the talent that Michigan didn't have more so. And the fact that you got a lot of these coaches in line basically around the end of the spring game, right? You started bringing guys in right before the spring game. You even had some departures, right? Because you had to get rid of Greg Scruggs. You lose Denard Robinson for the same thing. And so you weren't even finalized going into until you were kind of at the tail end of everything. And I think that you just need a little bit more of a jump start. They weren't able to hit the transfer portal due to the late run and the uncertainty surrounding Jim Harbaugh, and that hampered recruiting as well. So I kind of gave Sherrone a little bit of a pass because there was a lot of uniqueness in that. Right? He didn't know really if he was going to, if I'm getting the head coach, am I going to have JJ McCarthy? Don't even know that at that juncture at the almost tail end of January. So that's a lot to overcome. And I kind of thought, okay, let's get through this season. Maybe there's enough talent to will them to 10-2. But then after that, like we'll know more when Sherrone's got a full year to kind of be able to assemble a roster through the transfer portal, through recruiting, and figure out what he can do on his own, and then go from there.
Isaiah Hull, Wolverines Wire. Check it out. Of course, Isaiah does a great job and has been a friend of mine for quite some time. And again, an exceptional job covering Michigan football from a very in-depth standpoint. Isaiah, appreciate you being here, and enjoy the game, but not too much. And happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Appreciate you.